Airforce Show on News Talk 770 AM 92.5 FM WVNN. 6 minutes after the hour on this Friday afternoon. Hope everybody is doing as well as they can under the circumstances. Still coming to the program today. At the bottom of the hour, we'll be joined by Congressman Mark Green, just to the north of here, across the state line. Also on the show today, State Senator Chris Elliott. We're going to talk about the legislature and the possibility the state of Alabama could tax any kind of relief checks coming your way as income for your state taxes in 2020. And finally, State Representative Mike Ball, we were working on some let's say technical issues, so maybe we could get him to play his guitar as he does every Friday on the program. But join us on the show now. First-time guest, very pleased to be able to get him on the program. Former United States Ambassador to Japan, also running for Senate in the great state of Tennessee. Bill Hagerty joined us on the line. Ambassador, how are you this afternoon?
I'm doing great, Jeff. Please call me Bill. Good to be with you today.
Oh, thank you, Bill. Well, let's get right into it. You have an expertise on Asia. The coronavirus just makes it an even more of a volatile situation, particularly with regards to American national security. I mean, we were looking at, I guess, the triage right now and dealing with this pandemic, but that situation seems like one that could flare up at any given time.
Well, from a national security standpoint, Jeff, the focus of our whole operation for the Pacific region, and that's primarily China, was based in Japan. We have more men and women of the U.S. military stationed in Japan than any place else in the world. Why? Because we're dealing with North Korea, Russia, and China. And China was behind every tree and under every rock out there. You think about their Belt and Road Initiative, you think about the things that they're trying to accomplish there. They're basically going in and trying to use their economic might to make very strategic positioning all along critical trade routes. And they have built the military powerhouse out there while many previous administrations have watched. President Trump has taken a very different approach to this. And it was my great honor to serve as his representative in Japan as we began to build the bulkhead there and really launched an important strategy with the Japanese to push back and make the United States the partner of choice in that region. But I've worked with China and seen how they operate for years. And I can tell you what they're trying to do right now with this Wuhan virus is the crime of the century, in my view. I think it's the greatest cover-up in human history. When they try to act like it didn't come from there, they've even said that the United States, our military somehow put it there. It's just unbelievable. We know the virus started there. We know it was their efforts to try to hide it, to try to not disclose it to the rest of the world. It cost Chinese lives, but now it's gotten out. It's cost lives and economic damage all around the world. The Chinese are playing what I think was a public relations game, and what they should have been playing is a public health, working hard on public health.
Yeah, and is the global community, do they even have it within them? If not the UN or some other body, then it would have to be the United States unilaterally. I think China's got to be held accountable for this. They have sent the global economy into a tailspin, but on top of that, you have all these sick and dead people, and we're not really thinking about irresponsible actors like China right now.
Well, we need to think about it very hard. I was called up to the White House on Wednesday. I was there meeting with the team, and I got to tell you, everybody in the White House is focused on this. D.C. is like a ghost town. There were 8 people on my flight going up there. But everyone in the White House is focused on this. And I was meeting with senior staff on Wednesday to go through how we bounce back from this, how we think about coming out of this once we get our arms around the health aspects of this. And I'm optimistic that we'll be able to do it, but we've got some more work to go. But as we come out of this, we need to get our strategic supply chain back to America. It's become very obvious to every American. I'm sure all of your listeners are concerned about this, but if you look at the pharmaceutical industry and how much is manufactured in China, if you look at our medical devices, even the gowns and the masks that we need right now are manufactured in China, and we're having trouble getting the supply that we need. Chinese, the communist Chinese, see this vulnerability. They can use it as a strategic weapon against us. We've got to make certain that we're not in this position as we come out of this. We've got to bring those industries back.
Well, one question I like to raise, and it hasn't been raised that much at all, actually, is China, Japan, but more about China, I guess, the debt holders of the United States. Does having over $1 trillion in U.S. debt give China any leverage over the United States?
That's been raised several times. Japan is also a big debt holder, but I do not think that's a lever they want to push, because if they start pushing on that, it's going to devalue all of their holdings. So I don't think it's a significant lever at all. The U.S. has got a fairly diversified set of holders, but China and Japan are both, among the largest of the holders. So it's something to think about, but I'm not nearly as concerned about that as I am the fact that we've allowed, over time, it's been, one corporate decision after the other, but over time, we've allowed our very strategic supply chain move to occur in a way that pushes it to China. And how have they done it? They've done it by lying, cheating, and stealing. The Chinese have no compunction about going out and stealing our intellectual property. They use state-subsidized industries to cheat and undercut us, and in doing so, they force the supply chain there. That puts them at a significant strategic advantage. If you take a look at what they tried to do with our, evolving telecommunications network, 5G, they've got a company named Huawei. Huawei is a huge company, 193,000 employees. They've got the balance sheet of China behind them. Huawei is right now the only end-to-end provider of 5G equipment. This is what we plan to hook our electricity grid up to. This is what would control autonomous vehicles on the roads. This is something we cannot risk having Chinese involvement. So the president, I think, very wisely stepped up and said, we're not going to let Huawei or its sister companies be in the United States infrastructure. I worked very hard to get the Japanese to agree to do the same thing, and we did. Now the New Zealanders have done it, the Australians have done it. I'm very worried about Europe. But this is the direction we've got to go. We've got to stand up to China, and finally we have a president in the White House that is willing to do it.
Well, and I think that's very important. Putting some space between the United States and China as far as manufacturing. Well, look at economic systems. How do we in the United States, is it going to take a government approach to get corporate America to try to start decoupling their operations from mainland China?
It's already started. The president's come through Japan several times when I was ambassador. In fact, he visited 3 times. And we always made a point to visit with the corporate executives there who have large operations in China. I always met with the CEOs of American companies who have operations in China and in Asia. And they had already begun to move any manufacturing they could from China to other parts of the world where they had excess capacity. I think what we've seen here from China, particularly with this Chinese coronavirus, I think what we've seen is that China really is not a low-cost place to do business at all. In fact, it's the opposite. It's a very high-risk market to do business, and I think they are willing to. They've shown their hand here time and again. They'd be willing to nationalize an industry. They are willing to, hold back strategic supplies, and I think corporate America is waking up to this. That's why I was up in the White House on Wednesday working with the team, thinking about how we step in right now, begin to bring them back. When the president endorsed me, we talked a lot about what we needed to do if I could come and join him in a new role in the United States Senate to really begin to stand up to China and deal with this. And this is something that we've been focused on for the past 3 years. The president's been focused on it for many years before that. He was talking about it in the campaign. And it's something that we've got to deal with now, and we've got to deal with it right.
Joined by Bill Hagerty, he's running for United States Senate in Tennessee, also the former U.S. ambassador to Japan on WVNN. Tell me this, the South China Sea, China obviously doing those man-made islands, and the United States' reputation of being of owning the seas because of our U.S. Navy. Is that, that looks like that could flare up as well, that they have for some time been positioning themselves to exert their influence around the world at Belt and Road and all this, including the South China Sea.
You're exactly right, Jeff. You may remember this, but back in 2015, Xi stood in the Rose Garden next to President Obama and pledged that he had no intention of militarizing those islands in the South China Sea. I would encourage, you may have already seen it, I would encourage you and your listeners to go and look up something called Fiery Cross Reef. That's a coral atoll that the Chinese crushed. They've poured millions of tons of concrete into the ocean, killing all kinds of biological life, marine life. What they've done is they've built a military fortress there. It's got a runway all across one side of it. It's got turrets. It's armed. If you superimpose the Pentagon on the sides, on that site, it would be about the size of a plate on a nice, table for a family of 8. That's about the size of what the Pentagon would be when you superimpose it on the size of the Starry Cross Reef, which is an enormous military asset right there along the busiest trading route in the world in the South China Sea.
Well, let's talk about this. I watch a lot of news, just part of the job. It seems to me the media really buying into what China is telling us, that we treat them as an honest broker, at least our media does. But these guys saying that they have no more coronavirus cases, that they are recovering, they're opening things back up. There is absolutely no reason in my mind to believe that to be the case. Is that your perspective? These are guys are probably just telling us, feeding us a line?
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. Those that would buy into China's story, I don't believe that data either. The president saw this. I mean, I think we've all got to keep President Trump in our prayers because he is working night and day trying to address this. But back in January, the president saw this. While the Democrats were trying to impeach him, he imposed a travel restriction from China. You remember this, back in late January. Biden called him a xenophobe for doing it. They called him racist. Now everybody says it was a brilliant move, and they wish he'd done it sooner. Because the president has been on this from the very beginning under immense pressure. And now I just can't tell you how upset I am with the way the Democrats are behaving and how much I can't wait to get there to start standing up to them. But now Nancy Pelosi and Adam Schiff are talking about creating a sort of 9/11 commission so they can investigate how the president has handled this. Now they're saying he's not doing enough. First it was too much. Now it's not enough. All they're doing is right back to their same old tricks of trying to find a way to undo the results of the 2016 election, trying to find a way to defeat him in 2020 because they can't do it at the ballot box. And that's the tactic that the Democrats have, and their allies in the media are only too happy to push it. And that goes right into the whole theory of buying what the Chinese are saying. And I think it's time to listen to what the president is saying and line up, because the president has called this right from the very beginning, and I think that's why I'm very hopeful that I'll have the chance to go serve with him. That's the reason that he's endorsed me for the United States Senate for Tennessee, and I hope I have the chance to go and be one of the strongest allies in the Senate to stand up against this type of behavior from China.
Right, and we'll wrap it up on this, but back to that point about, the Democrats, maybe I'm wrong about this, but this doesn't seem to be the time for that. And I think the public recognizes that. And this trying to politicize it, and it's almost a product of them being in a Washington, D.C. bubble and not really aware of what's going on. If they watch MSNBC all day and just talk to each other, they think this is the right way to go. But there's people out there really worried about stuff. And as far as I can tell, and we've seen this in Donald Trump's poll numbers, people are kind of gravitating toward their commander-in-chief and away from the impeachment brigade there in the United States Congress.
Yeah, that is exactly right. I think this, like every one of their attempts to unseat him, is going to backfire on the Democrats. It'll probably strengthen his poll numbers. I tell you, my family and I pray every night, for our president, for our governors, for our leaders, our local leaders, that we're able to navigate this and balance. It's a very careful balance, Jeff, between the health of our nation and our nation's economy. And my hope is that we rebound. I know you were talking earlier about how this is going to work for people, but our goal is to try to keep people on the payroll, to try to keep people in their jobs, or if they've been laid off, we need their jobs to be there for them as soon as we can get them back to work. That's the goal, and we've put in place a number of programs to do that. Whether it's the immediate checks that people will be sent to bridge them, or whether it's the loan program, the payroll protection program that I hope will be able to preserve jobs. But I really hope that we're able to navigate this, that everybody cooperates. We're all in this together. Abiding by the instructions to do social distancing, to stay at home where necessary. And let's navigate this to make this as short as possible so we can get back to work. But again, make no mistake, China is responsible for this. I appreciate the fact that you're bringing it up, and I appreciate the fact you've given me an opportunity to speak with your listeners today.
Hey, Bill, before we let you go, tell folks where they can find more about your campaign on the web.
Well, my campaign is so focused now just on helping people. It's much less about a campaign now. It's much more about helping folks. And together, my Team Hagerty, we've been donating blood at local blood banks. We've been trying to support small businesses. We've been volunteering and doing pharmacy runs. We've been doing supermarket runs. And what we launched yesterday, I'd love to talk about for just a second.
Go ahead.
It's called #CheckInTN. #CheckInTN, TN for Tennessee. But what we've asked people to do is think about those friends that are shut in just like all the rest of us are. Think of 5 people that you can reach out to. So go check us out at #CheckInTN. If anybody's got questions they'd like to answer or to reach out and connect with us, we are teamhaggerty.com. And on social media, it's Bill Haggerty TN on Facebook, on Snapchat, on Twitter, on Instagram. Those are ways to get to us. But I very much appreciate the opportunity to be with you today. Please join me in keeping our president in our prayers, our leaders in our prayers, and let's get through all of this together. Thank you very much.
Bill, thanks for coming on with us today.
Thank you, Jeff.
All right. That was former U.S. Ambassador to Japan, Bill Haggerty, on the program, running for Senate in Tennessee. We are going to take a quick time.